Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. The Wall Street Blockchain Alliance is very proud to offer our latest webinar, Quantum Computing and Blockchain, Preparing for the Post-Quantum Era, sponsored by the WSBA Enterprise and Technology Working Group and our friends at Texture Capital. Before we begin, a bit of housekeeping for today's session. Please keep in mind that this event is offered for general information and educational purposes only and is not intended to constitute investment, legal, tax, or accounting advice. Any views or opinions expressed during the event are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance. Please note that today's webinar will be recorded. We encourage all attendees to submit questions for our panelists using the Zoom Q&A button, and we will, of course, reserve time at the end of the event for audience Q&A. Now we turn over our session to our host, Mr. Richard Johnson.
Hey, thanks, Ron. My name is Richard Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of Texture Capital. We're a member of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, and I'm very happy to be here. I think you've probably seen me on some other WSBA events, but this one's a little bit different. Very happy to be here with the client we are working with who is doing something super exciting. I was introduced to Yoon from a former colleague of mine, and when I heard what he was doing, I really wanted to get involved. I think you guys are all going to be very impressed as well. So I want to kind of go ahead and let's introduce our guest. We have Yoon Ao, who is the founder of Bolts Technologies, and Jenna Peterson, who is the CEO. Yoon, introduce yourself and kind of tell us how, tell us a little bit about how you got into this space. Oh, I should say, by the way, what we're talking about today is how to, protecting blockchains from post-quantum computing. So we're going to talk all about that. It's a very topical topic, and I want to going back again to Yoon here. Tell us a bit about your background and how you got into cryptography and PQC.
Sure. I think my background starts with Wall Street, where I designed trading systems for a while, and then eventually I got to the trading desk and was head trader at several firms. My last firm that I traded in was last two firms were Geode Capital and Magnetar Capital, and then I had a chance where I had some free time and started looking at personal privacy and how to protect your own data, and that started that started back in 2013, and 12 years later, here we are. We've created a lot of new technology based upon data-centric security as well as secure protocols. And curiously, we found that one of our technologies that we developed is ideally suited for this intersection of cryptography and quantum computing and the threats to blockchain. So that's how we became Bolts Technologies, and we're trying to help the industry protect itself for the indefinite future.
Yeah, great. And and Jenna, you joined, what is it, about 3 or 4 months ago as CEO to take this forward. Tell us a bit about your background.
Sure, like Yoon, and most people on this call, I'm assuming, I started my career on Wall Street. I worked for 20 some years at a hedge fund trading all asset classes globally. I left as CTO and joined Injective Foundation as their CEO. When I learned about what Yoon was doing as a digital asset holder myself and understanding the threat to the industry, I was excited to join and help move forward security in the financial market space, specifically as it applies to digital assets.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so we're going to get into this now, exploring how quantum computing can affect cryptography and blockchains and what's being done about it. SpiceX is leveraging 29 patents that, so Bolts Technologies is leveraging 29 patents that Yoon and his team have filed. And they have other, in addition, they have some grants from the Navy and the Air Force. A lot of great technology and know-how behind this. So let's kind of start off a level set. This one's for you, Yoon. Very briefly, what is quantum computing, and why is that a potential risk to cryptography?
So quantum computing snuck up on us in the last 2 decades, and it's a different method of doing computations based upon quantum physics. And when it was just an idea, a gentleman by the name of Peter Shor used a theoretical, algorithm. He created one, and it's called Shor's algorithm. And he figured out that if there is a quantum computer, you can use it using his methodology to break RSA and ECC encryption. So maybe I'll just go back and clarify what cryptography we're talking about. There's three main categories of cryptography that you use every day. You don't even know it's happening. It's called hashing, symmetric cryptography, and asymmetric cryptography. And in the blockchain world, hashing is used extensively on the blockchain itself, and asymmetric cryptography is what you typically hear about public-private key sets. And the way to think about these things is the number of keys involved. Hashing has 0 keys, symmetric is 1, and asymmetric is 2. Quantum computing, using Shor's algorithm, attacks asymmetric cryptography, so the cryptography that uses 2 keys. And that belies all the foundations of all blockchains. And so for some reason, probably for efficiency and storage requirements, elliptic curve cryptography, which is a flavor of asymmetric 2-key public-private key cryptography, became the de facto standard for blockchains. And it has the smallest signature and the smallest key sizes. And blockchains, everybody's very, very concerned about being efficient and compact as possible. And it's been adopted without question. And for the longest time, probably over 2 decades for ECC, elliptic curve cryptography, and over 3, probably 50 years for RSA. The computing industry and society as a whole has decided that these things were going to be good forever. And that's not turning out to be true with the advent of quantum computers. So hopefully that gives a little background on why we're concerned about this.
And so just to kind of tie this into everybody, I think, the percentage of crypto users who really understand cryptography and how it actually works is probably less than 1%. But there's a lot of really, a lot of IP and technical knowledge behind it. And it does get quite complicated, obviously, when you're talking about the different, you mentioned asymmetric cryptography and the different keys there. Well, just to tie it in here, essentially what that is, in crypto, you've got the public key and the private key, which is how you unlock and move your assets around. And that's exactly what you were just talking about, and how that's potentially becoming vulnerable. So I want to kind of get through some kind of some of the basics around cryptography, and then we'll talk about some of the solutions and the threats around there. You've spoken before about a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. Can you explain that a bit more for us?
So, you'll hear in the news, for anybody who's interested in quantum computing advances, in the news you'll see, Google makes an announcement, hey, we created a 20-qubit computer, and IBM does the same thing, Microsoft does the same thing, and there's probably another half a dozen publicly traded quantum computing companies. So a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is what we call a CRQC, is a quantum computer that is advanced enough to break modern cryptography, which is RSA and ECC. We haven't gotten there yet, but they are making progress very, very rapidly. And this rapid progress is being recognized by all the nations around the world, especially the US. And they've put in a lot of thought into how do we defend ourselves against this encroaching threats by advancing quantum computing technologies.
Mm-hmm. So I think I read somewhere that you need, is it 1 million qubits on a chip to be able to crack Shor's algorithm? And what are we at now? Where are we in terms of the power of these computers right now?
I think at some point it was determined that you needed 20 million qubits. Then we're seeing advancements in both the physical hardware for quantum computing get faster and denser, and then also people are working very hard to figure out optimizations to Shor's algorithm. So you have a twofold attack and progress that's converging, and now it's down to theoretically like 20 million qubits. So
Okay.
you had a 20-fold efficiency in a matter of a year, which
Well,
is
that's it.
significant.
Technology is exponential. That's
Yes.
that's why it can be potentially dangerous. Let's bring in Jen here. So, how real is this threat? You know, given what we just talked about, it's not a linear path. So, what do you? You've been in the industry a while. What do you know? What's your expectation? What are you hearing? What are you telling other folks?
You know, it's interesting. In the last couple weeks, really, I'm seeing urgency around post-quantum security, the topic. I think people are past the stage of predicting or dismissing Q-Day. In my recent conversations, be it from blockchains to stablecoin issuers to custodians to VCs looking to protect their portco investments, I see a shift towards reviewing what the options are available with an eye towards practical readiness. And that has been a fundamental shift in the last couple weeks or months.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think about, we were talking about this before the call, you know, a few years ago, AI was this thing that was out there on the horizon. It's coming at some point. People are talking about it. I'm getting bored of people talking about AI. And then suddenly ChatGPT comes out and you're like, oh my God. And now we were just saying we all use that more than we use Google practically. So definitely this can creep up on you. And if you're not prepared, I think there's a significant risk there.
So
Another one.
maybe I
Go
could
on.
just bring it home a little bit to people who actually have traded in a little bit of crypto and held it. You know, the old adage of like, if you really want to keep your crypto safe, your coin or token, you print out your wallet key, and then you put it under your bed or in your safe. And that is really, you're printing out your private key. And whatever your token is, it's being digitally signed with the private key, and the public key is the one that will allow somebody to authenticate or verify that token is yours. Well, so the public key eventually gets exposed on the blockchain when you do spend it. And here's the threat. The threat is that having your private key put into a safe on a piece of paper is no longer valid if you have a cryptographically relevant computer, because somebody could grab the public key off the blockchain and regenerate your private key. So that's the real danger, is that your token is completely secured by asymmetric digital signatures, and quantum computers plus Shor's algorithm can basically crack that overnight. Q-Day is a 0 to 1 event. And it could be catastrophic for the industry.
Q-Day for everyone out there is the day, almost like a D-Day, the day that you get the cryptographically relevant computer that can crack this cryptography. So I think that's super interesting. We've heard so much over the years about cold storage, cold custody. People used to take that seed phrase and break it into three and have it on 3 different continents and underneath the bank. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
You've got the public address and you've got the transaction hash. The quantum computer can reverse engineer what the private key is.
Yes.
So, Jenna, who should be most focused on this, would you say, out of the different participants in the ecosystem?
I mean, I think it takes a village, to paraphrase. It's not just a question of blockchain securing assets. It's also stablecoin issuers and ETF issuers and anyone who's touching any sort of digital asset, anyone who depends on any sort of cryptography. And I would say, it's a very complex topic. It's very difficult to understand and explain. But the problem isn't that it's choosing the strongest PQC cipher. The real challenge is managing what comes around that choice, right? All the compliance concerns, the regulatory requirements, implementation complexity, future proofing when a better cipher is released or approved. And especially as it relates to just blockchains alone, the real world cost and impact of the increased storage requirements, the bandwidth, the block production impact with the larger PQC algorithm. So it's not just pick a great algorithm and you solve your problems. There's a lot more that's involved in making that decision and deploying it.
Yeah, I think the custodians have got to be all over this, but really everybody should be at the end of the day here. So let's move on a bit and talk about what governments are doing, because this is a potential threat to. I mean, we're saying here that elliptic curve cryptography is one of the areas that might get hit first, but all areas I think that that use cryptography are potentially at risk. So what is the government doing? I know you've got some government grants from NIST. Can you give us an overview of what's happening in the US and what's happening around the world here?
Right. The US has been proactively designing programs to identify quantum resilient cryptography, and they call that post-quantum cryptography, or PQC for short. Dr. Lily Chen from the NIST organized that effort since 2016, and just last year, the PQC effort for fruit, they standardized 3 PQC algorithms that is official now. And back in 2022, Congress passed legislation that is an actual law, the Quantum Preparedness Act, and that mandates the U.S. government and all its facets to move to quantum computing eventually by 2035 as a drop-dead date. All our allies and other nations around the world have followed that lead, and they've come up with different end dates of drop-dead dates to be quantum resilient. And what we're seeing is that these countries are coming out with even more aggressive timelines. So Australia popped up and said 2030 is our deadline because we think it's going to be more urgent than that. India comes out and says 2028, right? So you can see that there is a growing paranoia. If you think about all the infrastructure that's digital, that's protected, all your bank transactions, all your browsing, all of that is at risk theoretically, right? So they all use the same cryptography.
What about the bad actors though, like North Korea? They've been, behind a lot of ransomware attacks. They understand crypto. They're mining it to fund their economy. They're hacking people. I mean, I'm sure they'd love to get a quantum computer and start draining everyone's wallets, right?
Absolutely. I mean, any government or nation state that has the people and the resources to develop a quantum computer, this is ground zero. So, if we take a step back and look at our conventional semiconductor business, you'll see that it's a trifecta, right? You got ASML producing the printing machines. You got Intel and TSMC are the only 2 major manufacturers that could design and produce semiconductors at scale. That is a Western mentality, and it's controlled by Western forces. Quantum computing is ground zero.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody with a better idea, a better approach, they could leapfrog every nation in the world to become a new trendsetter and become a lead. And that's why, you have major countries putting in a lot of research dollars into this effort, because it can become where they're not beholden to who ASML could sell their best machines to. Right now, that's very, very restricted, as you know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm thinking what you just said there. I'm thinking DeepSeek as well. No one was expecting that. So we could all get surprised. So let's talk about some of the transition challenges here. So, by the way, we're having a Q&A at the end, but I know we're getting some technical details here. If anyone in the audience has any questions, throw your hand up. If you're thinking it, I'm sure someone else is. And we've got this opportunity to speak to these experts. So feel free to ask questions and we'll address them as we go forward. So what's the kind of state right now in terms of, I think you touched on a little bit in some of, the post-quantum, there are already some post-quantum algorithms out there, right? Like dilithium I've heard of and some others.
Right. There's 3 of them, Kyber, dilithium, and Sphinx Plus. Those are the first 3. But you go, hey, you're saying that RSA and ECC are threatened, and so now we have 3 that'll replace it. It's not just 3. These 3 algorithms come in 16 variants, 16 flavors, right? So cryptography is full of variants, and ECC and RSA are not alone. They alone probably have at least a dozen variants. The problem is that there is an underlying fundamental truth that hasn't been disproven so far, is that in cryptography, there's ever only been one provably secure algorithm, and that's called a one-time pad. And you've all seen this in movies where they crack open secret codes and compare numbers, and that's how they, do some press a big button. But anyway, that's the only algorithm that's mathematically proven to be secure. What that implies is that everything else that we've been using and that's being proposed is a best guess. And that's becoming true with RSA and ECC, where we thought it was safe, and now it isn't, right? So things change very rapidly, and because of that, the NIST started with these 3 standards. They have on deck 2 more to be standardized as quickly as possible. And then after that, a whole bunch of new digital signature algorithms. And by the end, if they do all what they say they're going to do, in the next few years, you may end up with 50 variants or more. Now, to complicate that even more, this is becoming a politicized thing. It's no longer just science, because now you have South Korea and China who have announced their own standards organizations for PQC selections. So they're going to have their own regional jurisdictional PQC flavors. And you may see a world where we have PQC variants that number in the hundreds or over 100. And so that brings us to, how do you transition? What's the big problem of, like, why can't a blockchain go from ECC to, hey, we'll go to dilithium? What's the big deal? It's right there. Well, dilithium comes in 3 flavors. And not only that, what if it's broken? What if somebody figures out how to crack dilithium? And for people who deal with blockchain technologies, changing something as fundamental as the cryptography that protects the coin on a blockchain is incredibly painful and a long process. And that's where the problems lie, because do you just choose one out of 100 potentially? How do you choose?
So let's level set a bit here. How many blockchains out there are currently resistant to quantum computing?
I would say probably a handful, probably like 3 to 5, and those are mostly small examples. I think some of them have launched and they have a little bit of a following, but they're very early on, and obviously the gorillas in the room are Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they haven't changed yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know the numbers exactly here, but it's probably a tiny fraction of 1% of the total market cap of all crypto has some kind of quantum resilience in there. There's talk about, so there's a Bitcoin improvement proposal out there, I think it's BIP 360, which is trying to address this. But my understanding is that that would require a hard fork. In fact, it would probably require a hard fork of nearly every chain out there.
I think if you read the BIP 360, I think they're doing a really good job in tackling the issues, but they're still learning. And we've been at this for the last 10 years. And what we've seen is that most likely any kind of transition for a blockchain will require a hard fork. So blockchains require a hard fork when you change a few things. One of them is size. So if you increase the size of a key, which implies that you're increasing the size of the transaction that's being stored, especially with Bitcoin, it has a very limited block size. A block size is how many transactions you could fit into a block before the Bitcoin miner could put that permanently onto the blockchain, right? So that's going to have to change, or major changes to augmented, because the ECC key size and signature size is incredibly small, like 64 bytes. And then, if you take a look at some of these PQC algos and the signatures and key sizes they produce, it's multiples of ECC sizes.
Yeah.
So the blockchain becomes very, very large, much larger.
But one of the things I love about your solution is that you mentioned that, you know, whether it's dilithium or Kyber, they could get you, a chain could implement one of these post-quantum algorithms and then that gets broken. What you're building is kind of, you know, a plug-in or a bolt-in even that once it's implemented, you can upgrade to any new PQC algorithm. So if, you know, algorithm 1 gets hacked, you can switch over in the chain. So it's a long-term solution, which I think is super exciting. Jenna, what do you think? We talked a bit about the timeline here and the risk. What are the, you know, what risks do organizations run if they delay the migration for too long?
Well, as you mentioned, Lazarus Group is very actively right now today draining wallets, projects, and if they can get their hands on a post-quantum solution that can break all these encryption algorithms, they will either drain or disrupt the financial markets. Right now, everyone is trying to figure out the best solution. It's a complex topic, and again, it's not just about choosing the right cipher. Some of these blockchains that you mentioned previously, they've decided to double down on one solution, and they could be right and they could be wrong. It's putting all of your eggs in one basket.
That's a huge
So
risk, right? Yeah.
it's a huge risk, and they might be right. So we hope they're right. Right? Nobody wants mass chaos in the market because encryption is no longer secure. So I think what everyone's doing right now is scrambling to try to figure out what the best deployment solution is, given that it's a huge tech lift to put in a PQC algorithm or solution in place, either to an existing blockchain or to launch a separate either DApp or L2 or another blockchain. And as you mentioned, the trickle impact of the decision you make impacts your block production, your tokenomics, your validated rewards. It's not just a security decision, it's a compliance decision. It's a ecosystem decision, and all these different participants have different governance models in terms of who gets to decide what gets deployed and when. So some are easy solutions. If you're Circle can go ahead and make that decision a lot faster than Ethereum, that has a lot of decentralized stakeholders and voices and security experts in the space. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one review exercise for all. It depends on who the digital asset participant is, which is why we're having different talks across the board with the blockchain providers, the issuers, the people who are protecting their assets beyond just the blockchain.
Yeah, definitely say we, you know, you and his team and Jenna would be very interested in speaking with any layer ones or custodians or people like Circle out there who wants to learn more. There'll be, you know, we'd love the opportunity to have a more detailed presentation. Got a question coming in from the audience here. What about the energy consumption with AI servers, Bitcoin mining? I'm guessing this is kind of more energy consumption. That's the way things are going anyway. But do quantum computers use more energy or less energy than a regular computer?
I think current technology for quantum computing, it tends to use a lot more energy because they usually have to bring the temperature down very, very low for these things to actually work. So bringing the temperature down takes a tremendous amount of energy. But like everything else, you know that somebody's working on room temperature quantum computers, and you don't know when these advances are going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a whole thing around superconductors a while ago, right? Room temperature superconductors, and that turned out to be a bit of a hoax. Anyway. Yeah.
You know, and then the other thing is that the way to think about what we've been working on and how we approach this problem is when it comes to applied cryptography, somewhere along the line, I got fed up with all these variations and parameters that you have to choose to put in a particular algorithm to work. And I just resorted to kind of the Burger King method, right? Burger King has a very, very nice saying, have it your way, right? So I said, what if we were able to package something, especially cryptography, in such a way that anybody can have what they want on any message, And that's what we developed. And then for the industry as a whole for blockchain, when you come to the security, how long a particular algo can be secure, no one can guarantee it. That's one of the reasons why NIST is looking at so many variants to standardize, because they're not sure. That's a true telling of it. And well, then you do the Bruce Lee method of fighting, right? When he developed his fighting style, it was to adapt to the opponent, right? And then you just change your style on the fly, and that's what our technology will allow you to do. If a blockchain is going to transition, why transition to a best guess? Transition to a method that allows you to choose what you want to protect your coin with at any given transaction. And beyond that, we found that our technology will allow the coin holder, the asset holder, to make that choice if they wanted to. So no other blockchain allows you to do that. We will produce new capabilities that actually empower every digital asset owner on any blockchain if they transition to this type of technology.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a good lead into the next audience question, but maybe I'll throw this one over to Jenna here. Can you speak to the future of Bolt's technology and its trajectory or market acceptance?
We have a few different potential clients. Some of those would be the L1s, the L2s, the blockchains themselves that would want to go ahead and protect all the builders and the dApps in their ecosystem. And the other would be anyone who is releasing digital asset securities. If you look at BlackRock as an example, they amended their ETF filing saying one of the risks is a post-quantum computing Q-day scenario. So the stablecoin issuers of the world, the Circles of the world, the Agoras, the Tethers of the world want to protect their assets. The custodians, right? Qualified custodians, I foresee at some future date will be required to prove they are post-quantum ready and secure. So we have a few different potential clients and use cases and also commercial models, either selling as an API annual fee structure or a per transaction fee structure. So it's flexible and that it can accommodate the various users and needs in the digital asset space.
Mm-hmm. And I think you were touching on that here. Can you kind of explain the concept of crypto agility and why that matters? And I know that's something that Boltz is focusing on.
Well, crypto agility is this ability to change ciphers when needed in a very easy way without traumatizing your developers and your users at the same time. So because of the uncertainty of the security of a particular algo or standard, crypto agility allows you to be very flexible and respond in real time to algos that are found to be vulnerable next week or next year. And this has happened several times in the NIST selection process. So we had a round 3 back in like 2022. These are late stage survivor algorithms that went through many rounds of evaluation. And 2 of them, researchers found, quick ways to, break them like overnight. And NIST had to drop those algos, right? And so even after many years of scrutiny and examination, these vulnerabilities do exist. It's a matter of somebody looking at it the right way and then finding a weakness, and then you have a big problem.
I remember when you told me a story when we first met that you weren't necessarily focused on blockchain cryptography. You were just focused on cryptography, and you'd gone into NIST and you'd received this grant and this funding, and they were the ones who actually said, why don't you start seeing how you can apply this to blockchain? So they actually gave you the kind of the lead and set you off. Is that right?
Yes, we did this for our own reasons, for data-centric security, which is a different way of securing data. And like I said, it got to the point where it's very, very painful to do applied cryptographic programming with flexibility. And that's why this technology was developed. And the NIST, they granted us a SBIR-1 Phase 1 grant in order to show them how this technology works. And they told us we were working directly with the cryptographers selecting PQC algorithms. And they said that they wanted to see how this works because they didn't think it was possible. And, they were like, show us. And we actually showed them how it was done and produced a paper for it. And so in effect, it's probably the only transitional technology for cryptography that's been basically validated by NIST scrutiny.
Great. You brought up something earlier, Jen, that I hadn't really thought about too much. Now we've got so many of the exchange traded products out there, which are amassing billions and billions of AUM. You compare, like you said, maybe you compare BlackRock to an Ethereum. A BlackRock's going to be able to do something a lot more quickly than the Ethereum community. So maybe TradFi will ultimately be the driver here, which would be a little bit ironic. But if you were advising a CIO today, of BlackRock or any of these other ETP providers, what would be your advice?
I'm a little bit biased in this case, but I do believe that QFlex addresses what we believe are all of the key concerns that anyone in the digital asset space would have. Regulatory compliance. So you can't get a better validator than NIST. Also compliance in that you're going to have differing opinions. We all know, we all worked on Wall Street and we've had to deal with regulators around the world. They never agree, right? But that's the only thing we can agree on, that they're not going to agree on something. So if you're a global offering, how do you go ahead and comply with the PQC requirements in Australia, the PQC requirements in Europe, the PQC requirements in the US that might differ? We allow you to easily handle that because you can choose which cipher you use depending on inputs like geographic regions, product offerings, etc. I think the biggest bang for the buck is the cipher wrapping feature of QFlex, which allows you to quickly and easily under the hood change the cipher if something better or something more secure comes along, something more performant, without having to rip out your entire tech stack. So it's really future proofing against compliance concerns, counterparty concerns, efficiency concerns. It gives you a long-term readiness solution. And I haven't found anyone else that offers a similar type product. I think there are a lot of brilliant people in the space that are solving for this, like you said, with FAG, with offering different new blockchain solutions, with offering different cipher specific options, but they aren't future proofing in an easy manner that can quickly protect you, because that's the other thing, right? Like before, for somebody to steal $1.2 billion, it would take a while. Right now, Lazarus, few keyboard clicks, boom, they hack an exchange, they drain 1.2. If somebody can go ahead and break the algorithms using whatever quantum computer, and they can drain BlackRock's ETFs in the blink of an eye, right? So things are moving at the speed of light in the digital asset space, and you have to have solutions that adapt. With QFlex, you could go ahead and actually split your algorithms across 4 or 5, take a quarter of your assets, protect them with algorithm A, the other quarter with B, C, and D. Nobody wants to lose a quarter of your assets, but it's better than losing the whole kit and caboodle, right? So there are other concerns that CISOs really need to start investigating and trying to figure out how to right size their solution.
Yeah, QFlex is the technology behind Bolts, by the way. So I'm gonna ask a couple of wrapping up questions here now. So if you're watching in the audience, you've got a burning question, please pop it in the chat. We'll open up for questions in a couple minutes here. Maybe this one's for you. What's the biggest myth about quantum computing and cryptography that you want to debunk right now?
Well, as I mentioned earlier when we started this, there's 3 types of cryptography based upon number of keys. And the one that's really being threatened by quantum computers really is concentrated on asymmetric or two-key cryptography, public-private keys. What's very kind of is very subtle but is significant is that symmetric cryptography, which is things like AES and then hashing, they're threatened by Grover's algorithm on a quantum computer, but it's not as drastic as Shor's algorithm on a quantum computer. And for the most part, they are still deemed to be secure against quantum computers, even when we have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. So the real problem here is that when you come to quantum computing and regular conventional computers like our semiconductors right now, they both have a very difficult time figuring out random numbers. So there's no advantages in figuring out random numbers, and random numbers is what drives symmetric cryptography. And that's exactly what protects, let's say, our transaction sessions and your video calls and your phone calls and whatnot. So that is a misnomer that quantum computers weaken every cryptography. That's not true. It weakens significantly the asymmetric cryptography.
All right. And Jenna, where do you think we'll be 5 or 10 years from here?
Well, the digital asset space is changing on a number of fronts. I think from a security perspective, some chains, some digital asset offerings will disappear because they will have proven themselves to be insecure and their funds will be drained. And the smart players will realize that protecting their digital assets does involve a post-quantum computing solution that needs to be deployed sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, there are a lot of smart cookies that I've been talking to lately who are aware of this and are trying to find the best solution to secure.
Yeah. I think a lot of it's been under the radar, a lot of the work that's been going on. So I'm so happy to do this fireside chat with you and get this information out, have people thinking about it. We're going to move to the Q&A session now. I've only got a couple questions coming in here, which I guess that means we did a fantastic job as we've explained it all. I doubt that. But someone here, can you shed light on the political arbitrage? I'm not sure I understand that. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, if you look at the political sort of view of this, it maybe you're referring to kind of the jurisdictional efforts where why do we need 3 different organizations around the world doing quantum computing, post-quantum computing standards for cryptography, like South Korea and China and the US. Though that is political, because there's always suspicion amongst these standards organizations, whether they've been biased by their intelligence community or military communities. And to make, there's always suspicions like that going on, that NIST will standardize something that, the NSA or the military can crack using these parameter sets. So none of that is really proven, and there's a lot of fears like that. And I think that's an effort that where these countries are going, hey, we need our own standards, and sometimes NIST is slow, right? Sometimes they take their time, and maybe it's not moving fast enough for these other jurisdictions, and they want to get going. So you don't know exactly what the combination is, but that could be the political aspect of how they come up with these standards and why.
Mm-hmm. Question coming in here. What advice would you offer companies who are weighing investments in AI versus blockchain/cybersecurity? How do they prioritize, or are they both critical investments? Well, I think you and Jen are going to be a little bit biased here. My take is I think that AI is pretty richly valued. A lot of the companies there. I don't know if there's time to get into a chat GPT at the ground up, but there's probably some quantum startups at a much earlier stage offering not investment advice, but potentially some good upside. But over to you guys. What advice you'd offer companies who are weighing investments in AI versus blockchain and cyber?
Again, do your own research, not
Yeah,
financial advice. I'm
exactly.
biased towards PQC, and people are starting to throw their dollars behind projects that are launching in this space. So I think all of them are needed. All of them are critical.
Yeah.
I'm biased towards PQC.
Well,
Maybe if you're looking at different tokens to invest in, maybe it gets to a point where, well, I think I'm going to invest in the one that's got PQC, not the other one.
I'll give you a brutally biased answer, and that is, hey, we have a solution here that we've been working on that wasn't tailored to blockchain, but we see that as an ideal fit. And it is the only one that we know of around the world. Even the NIST has recognized it that way. And we've been granted so many patents. I think you mentioned 29 patents. Now it's 31. So in the span of a few weeks, we got 2 more around the world. And so it is new. It's the way to think about it is that why did the Walmarts and Amazons destroy retail, right? It's not because they're offering better products. It's their logistics capabilities. They've grown that so that at the press of a button, something shows up at your doorstep tomorrow. We're doing that with cryptography. We're doing cryptographic logistics. We are delivering ciphers on demand to those who need it, rather than being fixated on one method.
Yeah. I think Ron's got a question as well.
I do, Richard. Thank you so much, Yoon and Jenna. Thank you for this fascinating topic. I'm going to ask and take a slightly contrarian, I guess, technical question here. Qubits, Yoon, as I understand, are generally very fragile. Beyond temperature, which I think you all alluded to a bit earlier, things like vibrations, for example, and they decohere pretty quickly in general. And I think at scale as well, a greater number of qubits starts to get very noisy. They interact poorly at scale. Are we overestimating the immediacy? And I think someone might have asked this question, the immediacy of the problem, giving some of these really deep technical challenges with qubits?
So I think, I am not a quantum computing scientist, so I don't know all the little details. But what I do know is that there is a lot of effort and research going on to create more stable qubits and to group them together more efficiently to come up with a better reading. So all about quantum computers is statistics, statistical measurements. So everybody's working on, anybody in the quantum computing industry, they are working on some facets of it. I think we're forgetting one other aspect of quantum computing threats to modern cryptography. And there's a technique called store now, decrypt later, right? And that is, have you gone to buy a hard disk lately? You could get a 20 terabyte hard disk for $300 off of Amazon, right? So governments around the world who do surveillance for a living, they will store right from the internet routers, the giant internet routers, right onto hard drive. And whether it's encrypted or not, they are storing that so that when a cryptographically relevant quantum computer shows up, they'll be able to go and decrypt stuff to filter out secrets, right? That store now, decrypt later, that's a real attack vector, and that is being practiced. And if you think about it, in a most bizarre way, store now, decrypt later is the essence of blockchain. That's what a blockchain is. It's storage. And it's stored for everybody to see. And criminals will take a look at it and go, hey, look at that. That's a lot of money. We could get that if we crack it, right? So it's a very clear target. If you say, if we crack, encryption in general, which banks can we attack and extort? That's a more complicated process than attacking blockchain that says, here's the dollar amount you're going to get if you crack that wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, I think let's wrap it up here. Any closing comments, Yoon or Jenna, or Ron even? How can people get hold of you if they want to have a follow-up here? What are your emails?
Mine is Yoon at boltstechnologies.com.
.xyz.
.xyz, that's right. I can't get rid of the old com here, but .xyz, yes, you're right. Now, I think my closing comment is that there are so many factors, and everybody is working on so many of each of these factors, that it's very hard to predict. Like yesterday's predictions are already old, where we've seen that. We've seen NVIDIA's CEO do an about face on his comments on quantum computing advances in a span of like 3 months, right? Where he became a 20-year later type of guy to, I'm investing in quantum computing technologies right now. So these things change very quickly. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty, but there's a lot of inventions being made right now to get this done, because it is very, very strategic for nations to do it, very strategic for criminals to do it. And for us poor people who got to defend against all of that, it is getting more and more critical, and we won't feel that pain until somebody gets cracked,
And Jenna, how can folks get in contact with you, and closing comments here?
I'm at jenna@boltstechnologies.xyz. And I will just echo Yoon's thoughts that smarter minds than mine have been working on this problem for years. They don't know when the threat is going to be realized, when Q-Day will arrive. I'd rather know and sleep soundly that my assets are protected, be that at a bank, in the blockchain, or anywhere. And it would be remiss for large companies, large institutions, and anyone who is offering service or financial products not to prioritize a solution, given that the security risk is real. And even though you don't know if it's today, tomorrow, 4 years down the road, 10 years down the road, um, I think everyone now agrees it's coming. And since you don't know when, hunting it down the road is not a valuable use of internal resources, time, and effort, even though people think I don't need to spend the time, resource, or effort on a PQC investigation right now. I think you need to flip that narrative. It's a bad use of your time, resources, and effort if you're not prioritizing this.
Fantastic. All right, let's wrap it up here. Great conversation, a lot of content, very technical, I know, but it is coming. People do need to pay attention to this. There are a couple of questions about how to, from audience members, how do they stay up to date on these types of things. You also have a social media account on LinkedIn, Bolts Technologies. You can find that. But of course, feel free to reach out to myself, to the panelists, to Ron. You can send everything to Ron if you want, and it will get to us. But thanks, everyone. Thanks for the participation. Look forward to continuing the conversation.
Richard, Yoon, Jenna, thank you so much for this important topic. We'll have the recording live in the next several days. We'll follow up again in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.